The silent signal. The deep silence of space stretched forever, broken only by the faint hum of a single vessel drifting through the stars. It was not a warship. It was not a freighter. It was something different. Something meant to bring life instead of death. The hull of the ship bore the bright red cross that every spacefaring civilization knew. It was a hospital ship, a place where the wounded were brought to heal, where medics and doctors fought against time, disease, and injury. Its name was Solace. Inside, the corridors were filled with soft light. Human doctors and nurses moved quickly but calmly, checking patients, adjusting machines, and speaking in low voices. Their ship carried not only humans but also alien refugees, soldiers, and civilians who had been caught in battles across nearby systems. On board, there was no enemy. There were only patients, but far beyond the white halls and quiet rooms of Solace, danger was already drawing near. The first sign came as a faint signal that appeared on the scanners, at first too distant to worry about, then too fast to ignore. 3 alien ships, sharp and angular, slipped out of hyperspace. Their markings showed no mercy, no alliance to the codes of war. These were raiders, and the hospital ship was their target. The crew of Solace received no greeting. No warning, only the sharp ping of scanning beams striking their hull. Then silence again, a silence that felt heavy, unnatural. Dr. Elaine Marlowe stood in the medical bay, her hands covered in faint traces of blood as she stitched the arm of a wounded alien child. She did not look up when the lights flickered and the alarm began to hum softly. She only said in a calm voice, "Hold still." "This will not take long." The child blinked up at her with wide silver eyes. He was not human. His skin shimmered faintly, but he could feel the tension in the air. His small voice trembled. Are we safe here?" Dr. Marlowe tied off the last stitch, cleaned her gloves, and finally looked toward the sound of the alarm. Her expression was steady, her voice colder than steel. "You are safe. As long as this ship still floats, you are safe." On the bridge, Captain Elias Ward studied the signals with a narrowed gaze. The alien ships had formed a wide arc, closing in slowly. Their weapons were active, energy rising in steady waves. Every other species in the galaxy recognized the Red Cross, but some chose to test it. Some forgot what it meant when the symbol belonged to humans. "Open the outer hails," the captain ordered. A young officer tapped the console. A sharp buzz filled the air, then silence. No response. The aliens had no interest in words. The captain leaned back in his chair, his voice low and grim. "So they make their choice." The crew exchanged glances. A hospital ship was never supposed to fight. It was a rule written across countless treaties. To strike one was considered unforgivable. But the galaxy also whispered a darker rule: never strike a Deathworld or hospital ship. The alien vessels moved closer, and then it began. A flash of light burst across the void as the first shot fired, slamming into the shields of Solace. The entire ship shuddered. Lights dimmed. In the wards, patients cried out as the floor shook beneath them. But inside the bridge, no one panicked. Humans did not panic. "Damage report," Captain Ward said calmly. "Shields at 89%, the officer replied. The captain nodded. "Activate red protocol. Seal medical bays. Protect the wounded." All across the ship, thick blast doors slid into place. Doctors and nurses guided patients deeper into reinforced sections. The alarms echoed, but no one screamed. The humans worked with cold precision, as if they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The alien ships fired again, striking harder, sending a violent tremor through the hull. To the attackers, it must have seemed simple. 3 warships against a single unarmed hospital vessel. An easy victory. But hidden deep inside Solace, machines hummed to life. Panels opened along the hull, revealing defensive grids that glowed with blue energy. The ship was not built as a war machine, but it was built by humans, and humans never traveled without preparing for the worst. Back in the medical bay, the alien child clutched Dr. Marlowe's sleeve. His voice shook. "They will destroy us." Dr. Marlowe bent down, her eyes sharp and unblinking. "No, they will learn." Outside, the alien ships tightened their formation, preparing to deliver the final blow. But as they fired, the hospital ship's shields flared, holding strong, and a sudden surge of energy snapped back along the attackers' beams. 2 of the alien ships faltered, their engines sparking. The 3rd ship pressed forward, its weapons blazing. Captain Ward stood, his shadow cast long across the bridge. He spoke softly, almost as if to himself, but every officer heard him. They will understand tonight why humanity calls Earth a death world. The first 5 minutes of battle had begun, and already the galaxy's oldest law trembled in the dark. The human response, the second strike, hit harder than the first. The hospital ship Solace groaned under the weight of the assault, its shields flaring bright blue across the void. Sparks danced along the bridge ceiling, but the crew held steady. No one shouted. No one panicked. Captain Elias Ward's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Lock down all decks. Begin defense sequence." His words carried no anger, no fear. They were spoken like instructions that had already been decided long before this night. His officers moved at once, their hands flying over the glowing panels. The attackers fired again. And once more the ship shook, but Solace did not fall. Dr. Elaine Marlowe felt the vibration through the floor as she walked the ward. Patients looked up at her with wide eyes, some clutching their blankets, some whispering in fear. Alien and human alike, she placed her hand gently on the shoulder of a wounded soldier, a reptilian alien with scales that shimmered green. His voice cracked. "Doctor, they will come inside." "They will kill us." Her expression did not change. "Then they will learn that healers from Earth do not run." The soldier blinked, confused, but her tone left no space for doubt. Deep inside the ship, the sealed hangars opened to reveal the hidden systems that most never expected a hospital ship to carry. They were not heavy cannons like those on destroyers. They were not vast torpedo bays. But they were enough. Humans had always known that treaties and laws meant little in the emptiness of space. To survive, they built even their hospital ships with secrets. Automated defense drones detached from their racks, their small frames glowing red as they powered up. Shield amplifiers hummed, creating overlapping barriers across the hull. And then from the spine of the ship, 2 long lances of light unfolded. Ion disruptors meant only for emergencies. The alien raiders, confident after their first barrage, did not expect return fire. The captain raised one hand almost casually. "Fire once. Aim true." The first disruptor beam shot across the darkness, a bolt of white light slamming into the lead alien vessel. The impact rippled across its hull, shutting down engines, weapons, and shields all at once. The ship went dark, left drifting helpless in space. The second raider swerved, firing wildly, but its shot scattered harmlessly against the layered shields of Solace. On the bridge, an officer whispered, "They will not stop now." The captain's face remained calm, carved from stone. "Then we will not stop either." Elsewhere, in the lower decks, boarding alarms began to shriek. Grappling beams from the alien ships locked onto Solace, pulling them closer. Soon, metal claws tore into the hull, and corridors shook as intruders forced their way inside. Medics who had spent hours tending wounds now lifted shock batons and compact rifles from hidden lockers. They moved into position with the same precision they used when preparing for surgery. Every doctor, every nurse knew their duty, to protect the patients at all costs. One young alien nurse, her hands trembling, looked at Dr. Marlowe. "Why are you not afraid?" "They are stronger. They are more." Dr. Marlowe paused, her eyes cold and clear. "Fear wastes time. Time kills patients, and humans do not waste either." She handed the nurse a weapon, guiding her hand until it steadied. "You are part of this ship now, stand." The intruders stormed through the breached hull, expecting terrified healers. Instead, they found corridors lit with harsh white light and humans waiting in silence. The first squad was cut down before they realized the medics were armed. The second squad pushed forward, but every step they took was answered with fire, traps, and cold resistance. The hospital ship bled energy and shook with impacts, but it did not fall. On the bridge, reports came in quickly. Boarders on Deck 3 contained. Deck 5 breach sealed. Enemy vessel disabled. Captain Ward stood tall at the center of it all, his gaze fixed on the glowing image of the attackers. "They think we are weak because we heal. They forget that to heal is to face death every day. There is no fear left in us." Outside, the remaining alien ship circled like a predator, but hesitation had begun to creep in. What was supposed to be prey had become something else, something that fought back harder than a warship. With no mercy, no hesitation. Inside the wards, the alien child who had been stitched by Dr. Marlowe earlier clung to his blanket, listening to the sounds of battle. He whispered to himself, half in fear, half in awe. "They are doctors, but they fight like soldiers." And still the hospital ship endured, a fortress hidden beneath white lights and red crosses. The galaxy had rules, yes, But humans carried their own. And on that night, the Solace was about to show why the galaxy's oldest whispers carried a warning: never strike a Deathworlder hospital ship. The Deathworlder spirit, the halls of Solace were alive with sound, alarms pulsing, boots striking metal, weapons discharging in sharp bursts. Yet beneath the chaos there was order. Humans moved as if every step had been planned long ago, as if they were waiting for this exact moment. The alien raiders had expected fear. Instead, they met precision. A boarding squad charged down a corridor, weapons raised, their claws scraping across the walls. But the humans were already waiting. Dr. Patel, still wearing a blood-stained coat, stepped out with 3 nurses at his side. They carried compact rifles, their grips steady. Without hesitation, they fired. The attackers collapsed, their bodies falling across the shining white floor. One of the nurses whispered almost to herself, "We were saving lives an hour ago." Dr. Patel's eyes did not waver. "We still are." Elsewhere, Dr. Elaine Marlowe led a group of wounded patients deeper into the sealed bays. The alien child she had stitched earlier clung to her coat, his silver eyes wide. Around him shuffled humans and aliens alike, creatures who would normally never share the same space, now united by fear. But Dr. Marlowe's voice cut through their fear like steel through cloth. "You will stay calm. You will stay quiet. This ship will not fall." The child trembled, his voice barely audible. Why are you not afraid?" She looked at him, her expression cold and steady. "Because I was born on Earth. On Earth, everything tries to kill you. The storms, the animals, even the ground itself. If you panic, you die. If you hesitate, you die. We learn to survive by standing firm. That is why they call us Deathworlders." The boy's breath caught. He had heard the word before, every species had. It was whispered in warnings and old tales, but hearing it now from the mouth of a healer made it sound different. He realized then that even doctors from Earth carried the weight of that name. On the bridge, Captain Ward listened to reports. More boarders neutralized, more casualties avoided. The ship still held. But his face did not soften. He knew the truth. This was only the beginning. "Captain," an officer said, "the enemy is regrouping. They are preparing another wave." Ward's jaw tightened. His voice was low, steady, unshaken. "Then let them come. We will show them what it means to face Deathworlders on their worst day." Outside the hull, the disabled alien ship drifted like a broken carcass. The remaining raiders circled, cautious now, their pride stung. The laws of war said a hospital ship was off limits, but the laws of hunger and cruelty had no such limits. They would try again, harder, fiercer. Inside the medbay, Dr. Marlowe gathered a small team. They were tired, their eyes bloodshot from endless hours of tending to the wounded. But now weapons hung from their shoulders. She studied them with a cold gaze. "You are healers," she said. "You swore to protect life. Remember this. Every intruder who steps aboard threatens the lives of every patient here. We fight not for revenge. We fight because if we fall, so do they." A silence settled. Then every doctor and nurse nodded. The next boarding attempt came swift and brutal. Alien soldiers smashed through a side corridor, howling their war cries. But the humans answered not with cries, but with silence and fire. The medics stood their ground, their weapons steady, their eyes sharp. Each shot was precise, each movement measured. The aliens began to falter. These were not warriors, they thought. These were healers. Why did they fight with the discipline of trained soldiers? Why did their eyes hold no fear? The answer struck them as their numbers fell. These were humans. And humans, even in the role of healers, were born from a world where only the strong endured. In one corridor, a young alien raider raised his weapon, trembling. He stared at the humans before him and muttered, "You are doctors. Why are you like this?" Dr. Patel stepped forward, his coat torn, his weapon steady. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "Because every life we save teaches us what death looks like, and we do not let it win." He fired once. The raider fell. In the sealed ward, the alien child pressed his face against the glass window, watching faint flashes of light ripple through the corridors. Fear still gripped him, but something else stirred within, something close to awe. He whispered almost in prayer, "They heal, and they fight, like no one else." The ship still trembled under fire, but it had not fallen. The wounded were still alive. The medics still stood. And the attackers were learning a truth older than any treaty. Humans never stopped. Not when they fought, not when they healed, not when survival itself was the only choice. The Deathworlder spirit was not rage. It was not cruelty. It was the cold, unyielding will to endure when no one else could, and that spirit now burned through every corridor of Solace. The price of betrayal. The Raider ships did not retreat. Pride chained them to the fight. They had chosen to attack a hospital ship, breaking the oldest law of the stars, and now they were trapped in their own arrogance. On the bridge of Solace, Captain Ward stood in silence, his hands clasped behind his back. His officers reported quickly, voices low but steady. Boarding parties neutralized on decks 3 and 5. Shields at 72%. Holding steady. 1 Raider disabled, drifting, 2 still active. Ward gave a single nod. His eyes stayed fixed on the tactical display. The enemy was circling again, preparing for another strike. His voice was calm, but beneath it was steel. They are trying to prove themselves. They believe we are only healers. They will learn the cost of betrayal. Down in the med bays, Dr. Elaine Marlowe walked past stretchers and beds. Patients trembled with every tremor of the ship. Some were humans, some aliens, all wounded and weak. She spoke to each one as she passed, her voice steady, her hand firm on their shoulders. You are safe. This ship will not fall. But in her own chest she felt the weight of the truth. If the enemy kept pushing, even Solace might not hold forever. The next wave came with a roar. The Raiders launched pods filled with armored soldiers, smashing into the hull like falling meteors. Explosions echoed through the corridors as fresh intruders cut their way inside. This time they did not scatter. They came in force, hundreds of them, moving with cruel precision. Their leaders thought numbers would break human resolve. They were wrong. The corridors of Solace became battlefields. White walls once used for healing were now scarred with fire and smoke. Medics crouched behind overturned beds, firing controlled bursts. Nurses armed with shock batons struck with deadly accuracy. Even wounded soldiers, too weak to walk, pulled themselves to firing positions to defend those who had saved them. Dr. Patel moved at the front line, his coat torn, his face streaked with sweat. Every motion was sharp, every shot deliberate. To his side, a nurse dragged an unconscious patient to safety, shielding him with her own body. The Raiders pushed harder, their claws scraping, their weapons blazing. But for every meter they gained, they paid in blood. Humans fought with a cold fury, not wild rage. Each defense was measured, ruthless, unyielding. In one corridor, the alien leader shouted in disbelief, "They are healers! Why do they fight like warriors?" A wounded human soldier, leaning against the wall, answered with a hoarse laugh before firing his rifle. "Because every patient is a battle, and we never lose," the intruders faltered. Fear began to creep into their ranks. They had boarded expecting weakness, expecting to crush fragile healers. Instead, they were the ones being crushed. In the sealed ward, the alien child watched again through the window. His small hands pressed against the glass as flashes of fire lit the corridors. He turned to Dr. Marlowe with wide eyes.
"Why do you not run?"
"Why do you stay?" She crouched down, meeting his gaze. Her eyes were steady, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "Because if we run, you die. And no human doctor allows a patient to die while they still breathe." The boy's throat tightened. He whispered, almost reverent, "Deathworlders." Up above, the bridge shook violently as enemy fire tore across the shields. Sparks erupted from panels. An officer shouted, "Shields down to 54%. Ward's face did not change. "Divert all secondary power. Keep them stable. They will burn the ship to ash, Captain." Another cried. Ward finally turned, his voice low but carrying through every ear on the bridge. "Then we will burn with it. But not before they learn what it costs to betray us, and then..." He gave the order. "Release the lance batteries." From the spine of Solace, hidden ports opened once more. Long beams of light surged outward, striking the Raiders with precision. One ship's engines tore apart in a blinding flare. Another's hull split open, spilling fire and bodies into the void. The survivors screamed over comms, but the humans did not answer. Inside, the boarders broke, retreating in panic. They scrambled back toward the breaches, abandoning their dead, their weapons clattering on the floor. The corridors of Solace fell silent again, filled only with the hum of shields and the ragged breathing of its defenders. Dr. Marlowe stood in the aftermath, her hands shaking for the first time. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. She looked at her bloodied colleagues, at the wounded, at the child who still stared at her as if she were something more than human. She whispered, not to him, not to anyone, but to the ship itself. Let this be the last time. But in the distance, another sensor alarm rang. The battle was not over. The galaxy had seen humans fight wars. But now it was witnessing something else. The wrath of healers forced to become executioners. And with every shot fired, with every intruder crushed, the lesson grew clearer. Never betray the Red Cross when it belongs to Deathworlders. The lesson the galaxy learned. The stars burned cold and distant as the battlefield went silent. 2 alien raider ships lay broken in the void, their hulls shattered, their engines dark. One drifted like a corpse, its crew gone. The other burned slowly, leaking fire into the blackness. Only one vessel still moved, circling, waiting, as if deciding whether pride was worth dying for. At the center of it all, the hospital ship Solace still floated. Its hull was scarred, its shields weakened, its white paint marked with burns and cracks. Yet it had not fallen. It still carried its wounded. It still protected its patients. On the bridge, Captain Ward stood tall, his hands steady at his sides. He did not look victorious. He did not smile. He looked as if he had simply endured a storm, as if the worst had passed but the weight of it still pressed on his shoulders. Enemy ships withdrawing, an officer reported. Ward's gaze did not move from the display. Do not fire on their retreat. Let them run. They will spread the message, and indeed they would. Down in the corridors, the last of the boarders lay defeated. The white walls were stained now, not just with blood but with burn marks, shattered panels, and broken metal. The medics stood among the fallen, their weapons cooling in their hands, their coats torn and dirty. Some leaned against the walls, breathing heavily. Some sank to the floor, too tired to speak. But they were alive, and so were their patients. Dr. Elaine Marlowe walked through the ward, her eyes scanning every face. Humans, aliens, soldiers, children, all had survived. She knelt beside the small alien boy who had clung to her coat since the first alarm. His wide silver eyes shimmered with tears, but this time they were not only tears of fear. You see, she said softly, brushing his hair from his face. You are safe. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I thought healers did not fight. Dr. Marlowe's gaze darkened. Her voice was steady, quiet, and cold. We fight because we heal, and no one takes that from us. The boy nodded slowly, as if the words etched themselves into his heart forever. Elsewhere, Dr. Patel and his team tended to the wounded, not just their own, but even a handful of captured raiders who had survived. A nurse frowned as they lifted one into the medical bay. They tried to kill us. They broke every law of the stars. Why save them? Dr. Patel's hands did not pause as he closed the alien's wounds. His voice was heavy, almost weary. Because that is what we do, we heal. That is why they fear us more than warships, because even after we destroy them, we will not abandon life. The nurse said nothing more, but the truth of it struck like thunder. News spread quickly through the wounded refugees on board. Stories whispered in the wards, retold in shaky voices, carried through every corridor. They spoke of doctors who fought like soldiers, of nurses who became guardians, of a ship that refused to fall even under impossible odds. And when survivors of other species left Solace at the next station, they carried the story further. They told of humans who did not break, who healed and killed in the same breath, who stood as immovable as mountains even when death clawed at their doors. Soon, the story reached beyond the system, across the sectors, and into the ears of countless civilizations. The lesson was clear. On 1,000 worlds, commanders and leaders whispered the same warning: never strike a Deathworlder hospital ship. Not because it was against the law, not because treaties forbade it, but because if you did, you invited the full wrath of humanity. Not only their soldiers, not only their fleets, but their healers. For what kind of species turns their doctors into warriors? What kind of people fight with calm precision while still protecting their wounded? What kind of healers treat even their enemies after breaking them? The answer spread like fire across the stars. Humans. Back on Solace, the crew worked in silence. They repaired, they stitched, they healed. Captain Ward remained on the bridge long after the raiders vanished. He finally sat, his body heavy with exhaustion. He closed his eyes, hearing only the soft hum of the ship around him. Dr. Marlowe stepped in, her face pale, her hands stained with blood that was not her own. She stood beside him without speaking. For a long moment they shared the silence. Finally, she said in a low voice, "How many more times, Captain? How many times must we remind them?" Ward opened his eyes, staring into the endless dark of space. His answer was quiet, almost like a prayer. "As many times as it takes," and with that the ship sailed on. Scarred but unbroken, tired but undefeated. A hospital ship, a beacon of life, carrying within it the spirit of a world that had taught its children to endure the impossible. The galaxy would remember the name Solace, not as a victim, not as prey, but as a symbol of the oldest, harshest truth. Deathworlders do not forgive. Deathworlders do not forget, and you never ever strike their healers.